You've been listening to Toasted Hop by our speaker today, Jerry Gates. Happy New Year and welcome to the first ASMAC webinar of 2021. Please type in your name and where you're from in the chat room. Turn on your camera for a few minutes and wave hi if you'd like. Hi, hi, hi. Yay. Thank you for your donations to ASMAC members, for your continued support. Your support helps us present like these and other great ASMAC endeavors. Now is a great time to join ASMAC if you've not already. Look for Join ASMAC at www.asmac.org. Your membership includes hundreds of hours, and it's growing every week, of ASMAC event video streaming, and you will help support events like this one, as well as many other fantastic ASMAC endeavors. We're having a busy January with Mark Shaman this Saturday, next Tuesday, finale tips and tricks. Also this month, Danny Trube, Max Steiner. It'll be interesting to see how he actually gets here. Max Steiner, music prep Hangenard, Charlie Rosen, and an advanced big band arranging masterclass with Kim Richmond. I'm looking forward to that one big time. We recommend that you view this event using active speaker view in Zoom located on the upper right. Now, let's all please turn off our cameras so now we can focus on the presentation. And I'd like now to introduce our president, a wonderful harpist, wonderful human being, and one of the most beloved people I've ever met, Gail Avant. Is Gail with us? Are you muted, Gail?
She's muted.
And I unmuted it before, but then all of a sudden it got muted again. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Chuck. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that you've all had a very safe and a healthy and a very happy new year. And it's new beginnings for all of us. Anyway, I just want to welcome all of you who are joining us today. Friends from all over our country and in Europe and Africa, and obviously a very good morning to all of you in Asia and Australia. So thank you for joining us. We want to also, again, as I do every time, welcome our friends from our sister organizations, the SCL, ASA, AWFC, Maestro Music, Nakusa, and Muse. It's just great. It's just great that we're all connected and we're all here for each other. As I say, it's wonderful to be back here with all of you for our first event of 2021. And we've got a very busy month, as Chuck has just told you. I hope that you'll be able to join us as often as possible. We just love having you there and just seeing all your wonderful, energetic questions that go into the chat and everything. So meanwhile, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to tell you that Jerry Gates, our wonderful guest, is going to be joining us from Boston. He's prepared a great presentation for us, but I am not going to introduce him. I'm going to turn this over to Dan Ferguson in 2 seconds. Just want to remind you to please keep your mics muted, keep your cameras off throughout the presentation unless you're called upon to participate. Be sure to type in your questions in the chat room. I'll be here with you. And now, Dan, I've rambled.
Thank you, Gail.
It's yours. Take it over. Take it away. Have fun, Jerry. Have fun, everybody.
Hey, hi, Jerry. We're all delighted to have you back for one of your well-paced and informative presentations. I think we're celebrating about a 30-year acquaintanceship. And you put a lot of work into these, and the marvelous result is we get to see like a vivisection, if you'll pardon the metaphor, of compositional concepts, the blood and bones of how to pull usable and logical examples and how to articulate a concept into reality within a stylistic or emotional area. And one of your areas of expertise is using rose and 12-tone in various configurations. As Dick Grove used to say, everything in music is coming from somewhere and going somewhere else. Although we practice in isolation, we perform in a continuum. And the fascination of music is in the continuum from there to here and beyond, as you demonstrate very elegantly. It's hard to believe I said all that, but why don't we welcome Jerry right now and let him get on with it.
Hey, Dan, thank you
Jerry.
very much.
Hey,
And thank you to ASMAC, first of all, and certainly Gail and Dan and Milton and everybody else involved with the program. I'm just blown away. I remember being a part of this organization a good 30 years ago, I think now, and how localized it was at the time and how it's just blown up to this global entity. Thanks to technology on one level, but thanks to Milton and the rest of the board for putting together such great programs. I think this is fantastic. It's a great way to share information and give back in a lot of ways. I learned a great deal from your father, Alan Ferguson, as well as Jack Smalley and Dick Grove, of course, and a lot of other composers in LA in my time out there. And it's just, since then, I've just kind of kept exploring and experimenting. And so my usage of 12 tone isn't, as I demonstrated last time I got together with you all, it isn't to sound like Schoenberg or Webern or any of those early proponents of serialism, but to really kind of take it in a different direction and find other ways to use it as a source. Because people shouldn't have to be sitting there and listening and go, oh, that's 12 tone. No, I want to just use it as a source, and it's kind of my secret, But my idea now is to kind of bring it also some of these ideas to you all as well. So I'm going to share the screen here and just kind of get into it and talk for just a moment about creating a source, because we really can't do much of anything without a source. And Dan, I'm going to assume that you can see a page up here on the screen, right?
yeah, Jerry, I can.
Excellent. Okay, great. So what I first talked about, everybody, is when I got together last time, is just how to create a source. And this is one way that Jack Smalley taught me how to do it. And this was his way of taking 12 tone also and using it, in different ways than what the originators had thought. So the idea here is that we've got the 26 letters in the alphabet, obviously, but we've only got 12 pitches. And so what we're doing here is you would pick a word or your name or a phrase, something that has 11 or 12 letters in it. And then you would create your pitch ordering that way, otherwise known as a row. So for example, the letter J right here, it's asking for the pitch A. Okay, got it. Letter E right here, coincidentally, is the pitch E. Now for my letter R here, that's going to be an F pitch, all right? But in my name, there's two R's. So what we're gonna do then is just go to the top of the pitch row, or pitch column, I should say, and start with the first unused pitch. And that's a C, we haven't used C yet. So we've got that. And then the Y, oh, that's also requiring C. So I'm just gonna keep going down to the next note that's unused, the C sharp, all right? And I'm just gonna go through all the letters in the alphabet like that. So if I need a note, because it's already being used someplace, I'll just keep going down the column. And then in this case, my name only had 11 letters. So that gave me an extra letter down, or extra pitch down here at the end, which was the only one left. So that worked out pretty well. Another way to do this too is just to reorder the way the letters are showing up. So if we take a look back here, we'll notice that the letters are going vertically. But over here, we're going more of a horizontal. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, etc. And then we apply the same kind of an idea. So for the pitch, or for the letter J in my name, we'll go right here, and that's going to be a D sharp or an E flat. We go to E, and that's going to be a C sharp right there. And then we go to the R, and that's going to be a G. So that's good. But then we've got another R. So again, I'm going to go to the top of the pitch row and grab my first unused note. So that's a C. And then we've got the Y. which is going to be the B. And then the next letter is E in my name. So that's up here. Okay, we've already used C sharp, so I'm going to go down to D, which is the next one down. And again, just progress through. And again, we had 11 letters, and that leaves the last one, B flat. Now, what this does is gives us two different orderings of the pitches just based on the same word. And the reason why we're even thinking like this is because often when composers start using 12-tone ideas, they'll put pitches together in such a way that they know what the result is going to be. So they'll put pitches next to each other that they know are going to give them certain intervals. In this case, though, using your name or some other perhaps important word for you, it kind of chooses the row or the orderings randomly, or at least dictated by your name. But in a real sense, it's random because you didn't really think about what those, what the order was going to be. So you come up with some random ideas, and in that way, you will very likely come up with random ideas that you might not have thought about if you were just sitting, thinking about the composition. So anyway, that's where we are with choosing a source. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about today is how to create chord progressions from this stuff. Now, there's several different ways to do it, but let's talk about one first. A real simple, easy one would be to take the notes in order and just, let's say, notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we can put them in a triad. I'm dealing with triads. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, a question you might have is, well, how did I decide what notes to be in what spot? What was my thinking for the voicing? Because there's more than one way to voice this out, of course. But my thinking in this case was to order the voicing in such a way that I didn't have any minor ninth intervals. Now, that's just a choice. That doesn't mean you can't use minor ninth intervals. Of course you can. But I didn't want to get that chromatic in this case. So, for example, if I had taken this E right here and put it down below and move the F up on top instead, that would have given me that minor ninth interval. And, that's valid. It's just that that wasn't the sound I was looking for. So this is the sound I chose. Over here, I decided to put D flat, which is note number 5 here on the bottom, because I knew that that would give me some sort of a D flat major 9 idea, or D flat minor major 9, or anything like that would have been possible there. Over here, I've got note 7, 8, 9, so G flat, D, and G natural, but I ordered them in such a way, again, if I put the G flat on the bottom and G up above, then that's going to give me that minor ninth kind of an idea that I wasn't looking for. So I put the G down below instead. The D is the 5th, potentially of a G chord of some sort. And the G flat, or F sharp, would give me a major kind of a thing. So if I were to fill out this chord even more, then I've got some options perhaps of G minor major 7 or G major 7. And I'm going to have to put in other notes, of course, but this at least gives me a triad that has a vertical sound of some sort. And then finally over here, 10, 11, and 12, I decided to put the B on the bottom, followed by the A flat, okay, and then followed by the B flat. And again, just trying to avoid a minor ninth kind of an idea. Okay, so that just simply sounds like this. Let me play this. Let's see, this one here. All right, nothing special there, but it's just an interesting kind of ordering of notes here that I probably wouldn't have thought of if I were sitting at my piano or whatever, just trying to come up with a chord progression. I just probably wouldn't have thought of that. Now, obviously, if you've got a rhythm section, then you could get a lot of rhythm going, but in this case, I don't want to use a rhythm section. I just want to, put these notes together and get some forward motion going. And so that brings me here. And so being a bass player, I tend to think about what the bass is going to do first, because I know the bass can have a lot of importance in connecting chord to chord, right? And in here, there's really no analysis, that would be traditional. So we've got, in this case, I decided to have D flat major 9 as my second chord. My first chord here is F major 7 because these pitches all fit that very well. Decided D flat major 9 here. G major 9 because of the G, the D, and the G flat. And then the B natural and the A flat and the B flat, like a B major 13. Again, I'm going to have to put more pitches in, but at least this gives me some place to go. And so I'm going to just connect up the chords with the bass line first. And so that's what I've done here. I really like half step kind of connections when they're possible. And then here, so D flat is staying by itself. Here, the G is going to A, the second degree of that chord, or the ninth, whatever way you want to look at it. And then we're approaching from above, the C natural going down to the B. So I think of this as chromatic approach, which in jazz is really common for bass parts, to make the bass line approach a root or a really important note by half step. It's very, very common. So after I get this bass line done, then I just move up here and I've just decided, okay, well, I've got E natural going to E flat. Now I need to connect it to G flat somehow. And so I just go right up this D flat major scale up to the G flat. And then the G flat moves to the B flat. And down below here, the A is going up to C, both whole notes here, and then to the D, and then to the B natural, which is the third of this chord, and then A natural by half step down to A flat. So what I've done here is I've worked in some voice leading and also a little bit of a bass line here, just to try and get the music moving forward a little bit. So let me play this one here for you. All right, so if we were to look at the very first one here for a second and just compare that. All right, and then we'll go back to this other one again here. All right, so this is just giving me some forward motion. My history has me starting as a rock bass player in a rhythm section role, eventually getting into writing, but always writing from the perspective of a rhythm section player. So always having a rhythm section to rely on. And about 10, 12 years ago now, I made a conscious effort to do all my writing without the rhythm section. So that's a challenge because you have to get your forward motion moving in some other way. Now, classical composers know this, of course, but for me, it was definitely a learning process, and it's been really interesting. Voice leading and getting internal voicings moving is the way to get music moving from measure to measure, when you don't have any other way to do that. Okay. Any questions so far?
This is Dan.
Yeah.
I am seeing a question from Charles Gaskell in example 3. Why isn't E a natural, which is unused rather than a D sharp. And I think you did explain that that creates a sound of a ninth for you. That if I'm looking at the right example,
was it on this one right here, Dan?
Yeah, in example 3.
Okay, this would be the third example that I've put up. So could you state what the question was again?
It says in example 3, why isn't E a D natural? It's used rather than a D sharp. And I think that arises from your explanation of how you chose the notes that you didn't have, that were already used, you know. And
right.
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
All the way back to the beginning when you were showing what you were assigning notes to. Notes, yeah, there you go. That's what he was, and then example 3.
Okay.
So then you have 1, 2, and 3, and he's talking about example 3. I'm sorry to interrupt, guys.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So actually, it might have gone back. If he was talking about example, well, it's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got 3 notes that we can name: D sharp, C sharp, and G natural. But C was the doubled R, and we can't have 2 Gs, so we're going to go to the top of the pitch row and grab the C natural.
Sorry, Jerry, my mistake. I meant example 2, not example 3.
Okay, let's go back there. Let's see. So we got C, C sharp. Oh, why did I not choose D? That's the question. I think I cheated there. Or didn't cheat knowingly. I think what happened was when I actually first created this, I actually made a mistake. It probably should have been D natural. But again, you know, in the end, it's a random thing. What's that? I liked it, exactly. And actually, this row, the way it is right now, I've been using for probably 17 or 18 years. And I've used it a lot. So there's been no reason to really to go back. But very good eyes, because you're right. The next note probably should have been D natural. Right. So great. Any other questions?
Hey, Jerry, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm wondering, after you create your chordal row, as you show there down at the bottom, do you ever simply improvise a melody that you like over that chord progression rather than use the notes from the row?
Yeah, actually, that's coming in the next thing I'm going to do.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But
that's a great question. Yeah. Okay.
Jerry, we have another question from Martin Simonal, Marton. When deciding the order of the 12 tones, do I see correctly that it is normal to disregard the rules of counterpoint? Like in example 4, the 8th note leaps down and then further goes down instead of filling the gap in the opposite direction.
Right. I'm actually just using my ear to determine it. I'm not paying attention to counterpoint or any other rules for that matter. Although you could, you certainly could, but no, I'm not.
Yeah. So it's what you like. It's what you hear. It's what you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks.
I see it as a process of, a way of arriving at ideas that are not only different, but you may not have thought of, organically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions?
Carry on.
Okay, let's move on. All right. So here's yet another way. Now, if we go back here a second and do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we only get, 4 triads. Now, to get more triads from this, we could always create another row, another ordering of pitches, and add that on. But another way to do it is to do this. Let me blow this up a little bit first. So here's the different row altogether. This is the very first one I showed you, actually. Now, so what I'm doing here is I'm taking notes 1, 2, and 3. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Now, let's see if we can see the whole screen. There we go. and then going 2, 3, 4, and then go 3, 4, 5, and then 4, 5, 6, then 5, 6, 7, and continuing. And what you notice is that on every chord, there's 2 pitches that stay the same as the previous chord, and 1 note changes. All right. So we had 1, 2, and 3 here. And then on the second chord, we added a new pitch, note number 4, the C, but note number 1 goes away. So we're constantly changing the chord, the structure here, but we're only changing 1 note at a time. So that's not wholesale 3 notes at a time, which we could do too, like I did in the previous example. But in this case, we're just changing 1 note at a time, and we keep going through there until we get to notes 12, 1, and 2, and the next notes that I would choose would be, again, 1, 2, and 3. So I'd be back around to the beginning again. Okay, yeah. So go ahead.
No, I'm following. I'd love to hear what that sounds like too.
Oh, you're gonna. So we've got, again, when I'm looking at these two, I'm also thinking about what kind of a chord symbol might work if I add more pitches or even as it is. But I have to say that there are times when you can't come up with a particular chord symbol for a structure, but yet you like the sound. And so that's really, really important to still allow it. And why I mention this is because I know, being in an institutional setting, for a long time, but I even remember when I was in college myself, is that when you're first learning about harmony and analysis, it's really easy to get locked into the idea that if you can't analyze it, then it must not be valid. And of course, that's crazy. I mean, you're not going to listen. I mean, you're not going to, try to do Stravinsky or, any of those guys in the early or in the first half of the 20th century. You're not going to figure those things out with traditional composition. So what I'm getting at is, if you hear a sound, a vertical sound that you really like, but you can't come up with a chord symbol for it, well, don't worry about it. It's okay. The important thing is that the sound that you're creating is something that, you feel that you can deal with, that you want. So this sounds like this. Sounds like this. Oops, here we go. All right, so we've put these things in 3 notes at a time, and it gives us an interesting kind of a chord progression here. Now, my problem with the 12 measures is, first of all, this isn't the blues. So when I get to these last 4 measures here, it feels to me, since I'm so used to listening in 8-bar phrases, I feel like I need another 4 measures. So I get through these first 8 measures, and it feels totally okay, great. There's an idea, there's a chord progression. But again, I get to these next 4, and my mind wants to hear another 4 measures, so I've got another 8 measure section. Now, again, we don't always have to have 8 measures in our sections. It's just that in this particular case, I feel like it's incomplete having just these 4 here. All right, so what I did then, just as an experiment, these are those first 8 measures, and then here's the next 4 measures. But then what I decided to try and do is take these first 4 measures and put them at the end of this 8-bar phrase to see what would happen. Would it sound like, okay, we went back to the beginning here, or would it sound like the end of this 8-bar phrase? And so I was really curious about that. And what I also did along the way is I threw in some chord symbols based on the triads that I had already, and other chords that could be used with the notes that the triads gave me. So these are all the chord symbols. And, for example, right here, we've got D flat, E flat, G flat. That would be like a D flat minor 11. I mean, those are the notes that are there, but I'd have to throw in F flat, of course, maybe A flat as well. Those are notes that are missing from this structure, but I could put them in. But at least I know that these notes will fit inside this chord symbol. And of course, this can be changed at any time. I'm just really sketching ideas at this point. And that's what you'd be doing too. Nothing you put down here is etched in stone until you say it's etched in stone. Right now it's just still playing around with ideas. So I could change these chord symbols at any time, add to them, take away from them, whatever. So now this sounds then like this. All right. So to me, at least, now you all might have a different perspective on this, but to me, when I listen to this, even though it's these four chords again, it feels to me like it's the ending, like a second half of this next section. And so to me, it works. Now, as you're going to find, the other way to also make it continue to work is to add a melody in here that's different than whatever melody you come up with here. Or you could even change the voicings here to essentially change chords. That's another way to do that as well. All right. Now, any questions on this part of the deal here before I move on to a melody?
Jerry, I would like to disagree with you about one thing. I think the first 12 measures would make a lovely blues.
All right. Good. Well, that's the beauty. Everybody hears these things differently, and we certainly would make our own music that way. But it's good. That's great. I remember actually when I was in college working on my master's that a teacher, a professor I had, tried to get me to teach without, or tried to get me to create without bar lines. His idea being is to create the bar line, or create the music, create the pitches first, and then put the bar lines, where you want, after that. But don't worry about bar lines. And I've just been so involved with music that has a lot of double bar lines that I found it hard to do that actually. But it's an interesting process. Now, also, before I go to the next page, this is really, right here's a good example where I couldn't come up with a chord symbol in root position, at least, with B on the bottom, B flat next, and A. So I've got, a couple of stacked major sevenths there. And I like the sound, it's a nice little dissonance. but I couldn't really come up with a chord symbol, but I don't care. You know, I still like it. It's still cool. All right. So now the next thing is then I wanted to come up with a melody for this thing. And the melody is totally free, meaning there's no row involvement at all. And for that matter, there's no more row involvement with this. The row just generated a harmonic progression for us. And then I added a melody totally free on top of that, okay? There's some things that are common that keep happening. So like this, the position of this 16th note, or these two 16th notes, I should say, they become kind of thematic in a way because I keep using them. Down below here, the character changes a little bit because now I've got these quarter note triplets, you know, and even more. So there's a little bit of craft going on here as well while I'm thinking about what the melody should be. And I've always been a proponent of, you know, trying to repeat ideas, whether it's rhythmic ideas or melodic ideas or harmonic ideas, just trying to repeat things a number of times so that it really gets into the listener's mind as being real. Yeah, so this one sounds like this. All right, so you know, okay, so we've got a melody. It's probably not the next Grammy or anything like that, but it's, you know, it's at least a melody in here. And so the only other thing that I'm not sure about yet that I wanted to play with a little bit is form. And form's really, really important. Now, I can do this whole thing like it is, repeat it again, perhaps again, and then go someplace else. But I decided that I wanted this section to repeat again before we go down to here. So I want my form to be A, if you will, for these 8 measures, another A, and then B, and then it would come back to A again. All right, so I've got my composition in the sense that I've got a melody, I've got chords, and now I'm getting my form together to create a real lead sheet of sorts. So here's my repeats coming back here, and then it's going to go back down to the B section down below here. All right, let's check that out. right. So now I've got a form that I'm happy with. I mean, essentially I have the lead sheet here, and, where you take it from here is, stylistically, wherever you want to really go with it. And what I decided to do, well, actually, any questions before we move from here?
Well, there was a question that I had also, Jerry. It's a simple question, which is actually answered in your example, and that is, instead of starting with a 3-note chord, could you start with a 4 or 5-note chord and proceed that way? And I would imagine you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you come up with, your beginning idea that the row generated for you, the triads, you can certainly change them from there to whatever you want. I mean, in terms of, if you want, this E flat 7 here, if I want to call it E flat 13, there's the C natural, of course, why not? Add a B flat while you're at it, add a G natural while you're at it, all those things, certainly, absolutely.
What fun.
I guess my large point too here is that this whole chord progression, the way it all works out, I mean, I probably just wouldn't have thought of it sitting at the piano or whatever. I mean, yeah, it's just a way to come up with some more ideas, and a lot of times they're ideas that you really like. Now, in my case, I decided to take this melody and chords, and I added drums, a bass, keyboard playing a basic comping thing. And then I think this top melody is a flute, if I remember correctly. But the idea was, okay, well, we've got the melody and the chords now, let's do something else with it, or let's do something with it. And so this is what I came up with. So it's right here. All right. So there's so many different ways stylistically you could take that melody. You could go at a more orchestral direction, certainly, if you wanted to. I mean, you could take it any way that your creative juices will take it for you. But the main thing here is that we came up with a melody that was free, but the chord progression we came up with was, from grabbing triads from the row. And, again, came up with something that's perhaps different than what we might have come up with otherwise. Yeah.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
No kidding. I just think it's so fascinating because all of our standard chord progressions have been used and overused and extrapolated to the point where it's hard to feel sometimes that you're coming up with an original work. And
yeah.
That's what I love about this. It's another way of forcing things into a formula that's unfamiliar and sounds.
Right.
And,
yeah. So certainly the idea is to free us from that. Now, certainly there's a reason for analysis, and there's a reason why we need to learn what the rules are, in a sense, before we break them. I mean, so that because I think intent is really, really important. If you're, whatever the rules are, if you're breaking those rules, then, the intent should be there, and you should know that you're breaking those rules, and that but you have a reason for doing it. And I think that that's an important thing.
Right. Those constrictions are mostly for learning the way it's traditionally been executed. That's where a lot of the theoretical rules come from, so-called, and then are entitled to move beyond them, as you point out here.
Right. And I think a lot of it comes from, especially if you've been schooled first, which many of us have, you have to build up some confidence, I guess is the word, that getting away from those rules can actually yield some really interesting stuff. And I think once you have that confidence that you can do that, then you're in good shape. But confidence is a big thing for sure. Now I want to move to another way to use this same stuff, but or in another example. But are there any other questions before we move on?
There's an interesting question. What was the reason for the melody change in bar 4? D flat on beat 1 is now C. I get it. Well, D flat moved down into the chord, right? And you added no, the C is in the chord too. I can't remember. Does that make sense to you?
C, on measure 4 here, the C is in the melody, the 13 for sure. And I've put it in the chord as well.
Okay. Just go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that I had the question right, or whatever the situation was.
Well, the question was the reason for the C.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. That's good. One thing I try to do actually in my writing, and this is maybe just me striving to stay away from, I look at roots in the melody often as being something that it's probably one of the least important kind of notes to put in the melody. So I'll consciously go away from landing on a root when I'm composing a line. I try to use thirds, sevenths, tension tones, fifths, anything but the root, really just to hopefully add some interest. Again, the bass is certainly playing the root in many cases. And so that's taken care of. I don't really need to emphasize that more. And often I'll try and find, like in that measure 4, for example, that F natural that's in that voicing is a standard substitute note for the root, 9 for 1.
Right.
So I'm going to throw that in there because I know that's going to sound a little more contemporary than if I didn't. I mean, if I didn't put that F in there, then we're kind of talking about 1930, maybe into the 40s a little bit in terms of overall sound, so I'm just trying to bring it up to date a little bit and get some tension on dominant chords, especially. And so.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, sure. All right. So the next thing I wanted to get to here then is this time I'm using a different row. So this is the second row that I came up with at the very beginning of this whole thing. And what I decided to do then is use the same process. Notes 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, etc. And in this case, I decided to use those first 4 measures again. Again, it's something in me that just wants to hear that 8-bar phrase. And so, that's what I did. And so now this is, of course, going to sound a little bit different. It sounds like this. But we're going to hear the row first in this case. right, so same idea as I mentioned. And so now we've got a 16 bar phrase here. Again, I don't have a rhythm section for this, so I need to find a way to get these notes to move from measure to measure to keep the forward motion going. You know, if players were just to play these three notes measure after measure, you know, it'd get pretty darn boring. So we've got to come up with another way to keep things interesting. So I've come up with chord symbols now. In this case, I've got an A flat 7 here. So I've got an A flat, the D flat, and the G. Those are the first three pitches. And so, you know, with that tritone staring me in the face, it seems like I've got, you know, a straight ahead choice there. So that's what I've got there. Over here, D flat down below and a C. So that's telling me maybe D flat major 7. With a G, that's like a flat 5. And then here, a little more straight ahead with a C on the bottom, a B natural, and the G. I'm going to call it C major 7. I'll probably have to add an E somewhere along the line, but for the moment, excuse me, that'll work. Over here, I'm just going to move it to C major 9. And then over here, we've got an E minor 7, E, B, and D. F major 7, actually F major 13 because of the D. I've got F, G, and D. Now the only note that's really there is the F, but that's my decision that I'm going to call the D the 13th and the G will be the 9th. All right, over here, F.
Sorry, Jerry, it looks like an E. It looks like an E.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is E. Yep, nope, you're absolutely right. It is an E. Yep, you're right. I get stuck with those ledger lines sometimes, but you're right. It is E natural. So I've got two notes from an F major 7 for sure. All right. Over here, we've got G flat, A flat, and F. So I don't have a B flat in here yet, but these three notes will fit into a G flat major 9. So that's where I'm going to go with that. And then I continue with that, you know, same kind of thinking. And I've really gotten to enjoy flat 5s or sharp 11s over the years. You know, they make really nice ending chords too, in that they don't sound too dissonant, but they don't sound too pretty either. You know, just adding just a little bit of dissonance at flat 5 or sharp 11. And so I've kind of found myself using those, you know, just often. Okay, so then again, I take the first 4 measures, but notice this time, these 4 measures are not the same chords that I chose in the first 4 measures, particularly the first 2 chords. I just reordered the notes from bottom to top, and that gave me a couple of different chord choices. And, you know, so that worked out well. And even on this 3rd chord, the C major, it's a different voicing, and instead of C being on the bottom, I've got G on the bottom. So that that helps the listener not think of these 4 measures as being the first 4 repeated again. That, let's see, that sounds like this. So we've got some chords. Now that we've got some chords decided upon, at least in theory, we can start kind of connecting these things together a little bit. And so what I've done here is I originally started with the bass line. Again, you can start on any voice. You don't have to start with, you know, the bass, but being originally a bass player, I tend to think in those terms first. How can I connect these chords together using the bass line? And so this makes a lot of sense right here. E flat down to D flat down to C, no problem. But my next note is E down here. And so I connect this little stepwise motion down to the E, and then back up to the F. And I could tie this F to F if I want, but I didn't. And then G, and then G flat. And again, here's some half step motion, that chromatic approach that's typical for jazz, especially, as I mentioned. So we've got G flat to B flat. And the B flat, the reason why I chose the B flat is because I wanted to approach this A down here in measure 9 by half step. And in this case, it's from above. And then we move up half step to this B flat. And my next target is this E flat. So coincidentally, I am able to just go down by diatonic steps down to the E flat. And in this case, I actually hold it over as common tone. D flat's the next thing, then C. And then here, I need to get up to this G because I've got a C major over G. And then the next thing is just to get back to this C in some sort of hopefully interesting way. And that's just using the bass line. Up above, I've used some imitation. So I started with this bass line, but I'm imitating that also here in the, I guess we'd call it the alto voice, if we're breaking it up into 3 or 4 voices, but it's the second voice down. So I'm using some imitation here. And then I need to connect up to this A flat. So I go from E natural to F to G to A flat. And I could hold that as a common tone over to the A flat, but I didn't, but I could have certainly. And so that's my thinking. Just find some ways to connect these things together a little bit. This idea here with the eighth notes is reminiscent of this, of course. But then I also do it up here in not the direct eighth notes, but as a variation, if you will. We're still going downward. And then, yeah, and then the same thing in the very top voice. I'm just adding a couple of things here and there. But the whole point is to get the music moving forward. I've got no rhythm section here. I just want to find a way to get the music moving forward. So that ends up like this. Okay, so again, now at least we don't have a chord on every measure just kind of sitting there. Now we've at least got motion moving us from measure to measure. Many other possibilities. These are just ones that I came up with. You don't need a ton of motion necessarily, but it might be just enough in a, if you're doing some underscore or something like that, this might be just enough underneath the dialogue or underneath a scene of some sort.
I was just wondering, Jerry, if you ever pull like 2 measures, 4 measures out to do something like an ID or a turnaround or just a small cue.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the beauty here is that, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, the beauty here is that, yeah, you've come up with 16 measures here, but I might not like these 16 measures as a whole 16 measures. I might find that, wow, I really like what I did in these 4 measures. or maybe I just like what I did in this 8 measures, but this is garbage. So let me put something else up here. So the thing here is that we're still using the row to come up with something to help us. And it doesn't sound like 12 tone, it just sounds like, chords in harmony that, they're not necessarily functional next to each other, but they seem to work okay. But the one big key to get these notes or get these chords to work next to each other is finding ways to get the bass line to help connect you from chord to chord, and also the interior voicings, or the interior lines. So you need to think horizontally a little bit, not a great deal necessarily, but you do a little bit at least to get these things to connect a little bit better. And one thing I did here then is this thing here, I decided on a form now. I must be an AABA guy today or something, but I came up with this idea where, okay, here's my first 8, and then I'm going to repeat back and go to a second ending. And in the first ending, of course, I need to be able to get back to the E flat. So at least on beats 3 and 4, the notes are going to be notes that are going to get me back to the E flat. So we've got B flat going to C, which takes me right to D flat right there. Down in the bass, I've got G flat going to A flat. And, by fourth motion, or fifth motion, it's going to get me up to the E flat. So that's going to work fine. Or I'm sorry, we've got, yeah. And then on the second time around, what I need to do is get to here. So I've got G flat going to A flat, which takes me by half step into the A natural, the B flat, which is the third of the chord, down to F, which is going to bring me right to the G flat right here. Yeah, which is like the 13 of that chord. Okay. Now, in this case, I also added some string sounds to this as well, just to kind of try and keep things a little bit interesting. It's interesting once you start adding sounds, you start coming up with more ideas often. And so this is some string sounds on this, I believe. All right, so it's a little bit more going on there. Any questions so far?
Carry on, Jerry.
Okay.
Great.
Cool. Okay, so then after that, again, I'm only dealing with 3 layers here. I've got 3 voices I'm dealing with, and it can work perfectly fine the way it is, especially if you've got live instruments or even with synths. It sounds full, but I think with live players, in fact, I know with live players, it would still sound really full, but we can still add another voice. So what I'm doing here then is I'm going to add notes that help to fill out the chord I've chosen, but also make it a little more full. So in this first, so it's the tenor voice I'm dealing with now. If you're thinking soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or baritone, whichever way you want to look at it. So now we've got B flat, going down to F, up to G, which is going to be a common tone to the G of the C major 9, stay common tone G on the E minor, go up to A to finally give us the third of the F major chord here, C, the fifth of this chord, and then the B flat, which is the third of this chord, and the ninth is being held over. From being the third, now it turns into the ninth on the G flat chord. So I've added in another layer, and it's going to make it sound even a little bit more full than it already did. So let's check that out. Yeah, sounds a little more full, to be sure. Fun stuff.
Fun stuff, Jerry.
It's fun when you start getting to that point and you say, I can hear something here, because, even back in here, obviously we're just hearing it as strings, but, and this is just a simple, 16 measure melody really, but geez, imagine if you were to blow this up to an orchestra and an actual arrangement, and, you could really have some real fun with it for sure. But I can, yeah. This would sound lovely with real strings, that's for sure. Someday we'll get back to that. I certainly hope. As I was telling everybody at the beginning of the session, last weekend, actually 2 weekends ago, I had the pleasure of actually being in a recording studio, actually doing some recording with 8 strings. Now, the studio that I was in is a beautiful studio that caters to which is public broadcasting here in Boston, but they actually do a lot of the work for the worldwide public broadcasting system. And what was interesting is that this room that we're recording in, very high ceilings and everything, it would hold 50 people normally, but under current conditions with spacing, we had 8 players, and they could space out 8 players, and that was the requirements that they went by. And but what happened was, I got to the session and I'm thinking there's a whole bunch of chairs out there in the studio, and I'm thinking, did the engineer misunderstand me? We can only have 8 players in here. What's up? And so he explained to me he actually had 24 chairs. And what was going to happen is that because there was only 8 players, we're going to have to do a lot of stacking, just like you would do with vocals, where you're recording a layer, then the players are going back to the beginning, recording that layer again and again, just to stack the sound, to get a bigger sound. It's not the same thing as 24 strings in the same room, but it's a heck of a lot better than just 8. And it's a beautiful room that we're recording in, so that really helped a lot. So what the point here is that if you have the opportunity to record strings, even just a handful of them, the way to make them sound bigger is to do a number of passes, 3, 4 passes, and stack, put them all on separate tracks. But the thing you have to watch out for is phasing, which means that you're going to have some weird sounds happening because of the frequencies being really close together. when you record multiple passes and put them right next to each other. So the way to avoid that problem to a great degree is to change the perspective of where the player is to the microphone. And so what would happen is on every pass, the player would just move to another chair that was specifically in another spot for them so that the perspective of their instrument to the microphone changes. And so even though they're recording exactly the same thing as what they did on the previous pass, it helped to really knock down all those kinds of problems that come up when you record something exactly the same, multiple times. And it worked really, really well. It was a very nice thing. Anyway, so what I decided to do here was, go like I did before and come up with, like a rhythm section kind of an idea for the same chords. So I only did the first 8 measures just to give you an idea here. But so here's the rhythm section, essentially, no melody yet, but there's a rhythm section. And so let's check that out. All right. So, I mean, imagine live players on that. They'd really, it sounds really stiff as a sequence, but with live players, of course, it'd really get loosened up a lot. But then the next thing, of course, is to come up with a melody. And so that's what I've got here. I've come up with a melody for that. So it's essentially the same rhythm section, but now we've got a melody, and that's all free. There's nothing from the row. It's all just, what the harmony's suggesting to me. All right, just something to chill by, nothing too overly exciting there. But the point is to be able to show you, just one thing that you could do once you come up with the chord symbols. The style is, totally up to you after that. Any questions?
There is a question, Jerry, about the string section and whether or not the individual players moved just adjacent to their original position to the chair immediately to the left or right, or did they really scramble them around as much as possible? And that was something I was wondering about too. Did you could exchange the first and second parts, for instance, with the violins, but
yeah, the way they were set up was that the cello, as I remember, we set it up like the classic setting. So violin 1, violin 2, viola, and cello, just like you normally would. And what happened was violin 1, they would, for the first pass, they'd sit where they're sitting. And then in the next pass, they would actually, they weren't sitting directly next to each other. They were sitting kind of a little bit behind each other a little bit, kind of like diagonal, and definitely 6 feet. And then they would switch seats when, when it was time to make the switch, they would switch seats. Violin 2 would do a very similar thing. Viola would do a similar thing. Cello, in their case, they actually just moved back a chair, and the bass moved side to side in their case. And the mics were set up in such a way that it would catch everybody no matter, what positions they were in. There was no close miking, everything was, from a distance, the way you want to get a, more of a section sound that way.
Yeah, and it's a very creative engineering idea because technically you're right. If you play the exact same thing in an analog, the waveforms superimpose and cancel each other out in cases that's the phasing problem that they have, and that avoids that because you're in a different distance and location.
Right.
Yeah.
Some other things I heard about too that are other things that you could do along that line is you could have, a player play the line slightly different, like with different pressure, with different bow altogether. There's some other ways that you can also get around that, but the engineer felt that this was a simple way and it would take care of things organically. And it did. It sounded really good. I'm waiting for some final mixes so I can actually hear for sure what it sounded like. But I remember in the studio, we were, when we were doing the playing, it sounded really good.
Lovely.
Yeah. Cool. Now there's some, any other questions while we're stopped here?
About the chords and the way that you choose the chords and whether or not you try a few different voicings, which I assume you must. I mean, you're using judgment all the time in choosing which voicings, and you can explain that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really important for everybody to understand is that, there's very few people that know exactly what they're going to write in their head and then do it, and they know exactly what it's going to sound at the end. It seems few people that can actually do that. So it's a constant process. You try out certain chords, certain tensions, certain relationships, and see how that works. And if it doesn't, you make changes all the time. And you might call them artistic changes or creative changes. And even if it gets away from the row, when you're creating the chords, sometimes you just have to use it. Maybe you come up with a better idea while you're using it. Okay, great. Then you stop using it at that point. But it's a great way to at least get you started for sure.
Jerry, are you interested in take a break for any reason, or?
Yeah, I have one more topic, but yeah, I could definitely do it after a break. That'd be great. I wanted to get some water anyway, so that's really cool.
Should we take 5 minutes?
It's great with me if you're cool with it.
Well, I don't know. I didn't ask anybody. I just asked you.
No, yeah. I mean, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. I mean, this would be a good place probably to take a break anyway.
Hey, well, take a few minutes and we'll come back, and I'll take this opportunity to tell you about some upcoming events while we're hanging. And
great. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. This has been great, and thanks, Dan, for jumping in. And we'll get to Jinho's question as well as soon as we can. So, and thank you everybody for hanging in today. Jerry's been great. So upcoming events we have, let me share my screen. And here you go. This Saturday is going to be fantastic with Mark Shaman. He's going to talk a lot about a lot of his arranging and orchestration work along with his composition, but mostly focusing on stuff like Sister Act and some of these great things. So that's going to be great. Tuesday, we're going to have a special afternoon session, which is depending on your time zone, at 4 p.m. in New York City. I'm sorry, 4 p.m. in Los Angeles, 7 p.m. in New York City, which makes it awfully late in Europe and a good time for Asia and Australia. But we're going to talk about finale tips and tricks from Jason, who is the guy who does all the great videos on YouTube on Conquering Finale. So you might check that out if you're into Finale, and even if you're not, you might pick up something. And then a week from Saturday, we have Danny True, who's going to be with Disney, talking about Disney animation, presented by ASMAC NYC, and they always do a fantastic job. And lots more to come with Music Prep Hangar on January 20th, noon Pacific time, and 3 p.m. NYC. So anyway, these will be a lot of fun events. I'll play some more of Jerry's hold music, great music here. What do we have? Let's try Innocent Wonder. That's good. Oh, I tried to fade there. Hi, Jerry. How are you feeling?
Great.
Great. Well, thanks again for doing this. This has been wonderful. We both studied from Jack Smalley, who is an amazing educator. You can check out some of his books at www.jacksmalley.com. And Jack always used to say, get started with the, whatever to get you started, and then let your ear take over. And he's a great educator. Anyway, back to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, and yeah, I mean, Jack was great. I learned tremendous amounts from me. He really gave me a lot more confidence in writing in general. But it's a lot of people, of course, over the years. And as I often tell my students, it's not just in a 4-year degree or a 2-year master's on top of that, or a PhD or anything like that. It's all about a career, because you're constantly learning things as you go. And I'm still learning things today, and I've been doing this for too many years now, I think. But anyway, so this next thing I want to talk about then, it relates in a way to all those triads. We were talking about how to get the triads to move from one chord to the next. So there's a way that pitches like to move from pitch to pitch. There's a natural resolution. Okay. And so what I want to do is, first of all, talk about that and then show you some real examples of how that works. Not just examples, but actual writing. So let me share the screen again here. All right. So what we've got then is that with major chords, 9 goes to 1, typically. It doesn't have to, of course, but it likes to. Sharp 11 likes to go up to 5, or sharp 11 also likes to go to 3, but that half step motion up to 5 is certainly a common way to go and natural. 6 likes to go to 5, so the 6th of the chord likes to go down to the 5th, or the 6th can go up to the 7th, certainly either way. 7 likes the leading tone, if you will, likes to go up to 1. But it could go 7 down to 6 as well, and then continuing down to 5 for that matter. And these are also what we call tension substitutions. So if you're building a chord and you want to know what tension tones to use on major chords, these would be your options. On minor chords, similarly to major, 9 likes to go to 1. Again, it doesn't have to, but it naturally goes to 1. 11 likes to go to 5, or it could go to 3. Flat 5 likes to go down to 11. 6 likes to go to 5, or 6 can go up to 7. Or we should probably say flat 7. Flat 7 likes to go up to 1. It could go to 6, go down by half step to 6, but it can go up to 1 or down to 6 either way. On dominant chords, you probably have about the most flexibility because you have more options for tension tones. So flat 9, natural 9, sharp 9, they like to substitute for the 1. They like to resolve to 1. Sharp 11 can go up to 5. Sharp 11 can go also down to 3, just like on our major chords. Flat 13 or 13 substitutes and can resolve down to 5. Flat 7 likes to go up to 1, but it could go down to 13 or 6, whichever. Okay, so this is just a basic foundation of thought that you can use in trying to get those chords to move from one structure to the next. So let me show you what I'm thinking about. So here's a 4-measure example right here. And we can see that we've got the C major 7 voicing here. We've got a G flat major 7 voicing, B flat minor 7 voicing, A minor 7 voicing. Okay. We kind of lose any sense of C once we get right here. So these chords are unrelated to each other, but we want to figure out a way to get them to sound, smooth next to each other. So let me play the first one here for you. Sounds like, Sorry, I had it all right here a second ago. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay. Ah, perfect. All right, here we go. Okay, so one more time here. All right, so this is just four lousy measures, so we can easily listen to it as whole notes, but it could be a little more interesting. So the next thing I want to do then is, again, as I mentioned earlier, since I'm a bass player, I tend to start with those ideas. So what I'm trying to do here is then C, my root is C. And if I go to the fifth, which is very common for a bass player, the next note is moving by half step to the root of this chord. So that works great. We kind of hear this as that chromatic approach, even though the G natural is still a fifth of that chord, but it's more about where you're going, not where you've been. So we're moving by half step, and then I'm going to go up to a C, which you could rationalize as the flat 5 or sharp 11 of this chord, and it's going to resolve by whole step to the B flat, which is the third of this chord, but it's also common tone as the root of the B flat minor 7. And then we have our A minor 7 here. So let's take a listen to that. All right, so it's smoothed out a little bit, just because we've got some kind of connection going now from chord to chord. Now, the next thing then is to just keep working on these voices a little bit and using this tension resolution idea and chordal resolution, if you will. So the natural tendency is for this E flat to want to resolve down to the third, the D flat. So the note that was here before was a D flat, but what I've done is I've put the tension tone instead in its place, but resolved it. So by resolving it, you get that motion. So now we've got motion in measure 1, we've got motion in measure 2, and motion in measure 3. And the D flat moves by half step to the C. So we've got some really smooth voice leading going on right here between the common tones and the half step or diatonic motion here. All right, so let's hear what that sounds like then. Again. All right, so it's starting to take a little shape. And we're starting to get definitely some motion going on here. Now in this next example then, we put the bass line and got that moving a little bit. We've got this top line moving a little bit, 11 to 3. And then here on my alto voice, if you will, I'm going to, there was a G there first, I believe. And what I did instead is I put the A, which substitutes for the G. And the natural resolution is to go to 5. So by creating that resolution, that creates my forward motion. Over here in the next measure, I put the 7th in, but the resolution to the 6th, again, creates forward motion. And what's nice in this case is that it's a 10th from the E flat. So that's a nice interval right there as well. So that works nicely. All right, so that sounds like this. All right, and so we can go another step further with this even. We could work on another voice. So we didn't do anything to the tenor voice. So here I'm going to put the third of the chord, and that's going to resolve to the second or the ninth, which nicely moves to the flat 5 of the G flat. And the flat 5 can resolve upward to the 5th, which also can go up to the 6th, which takes us beautifully to the 7th. And then that's, we've got the 7th going down to the 11th. And then in our last measure here, I finally put some motion in where we've got the 11th resolving to the 3rd. Now, you don't have to go tension to chord tone. You could go chord tone into the tension, and that's also creating motion. I'm just, doing it seemingly mostly through tension tone to resolving it, but you could go the other way with it as well. And that's going to sound like this.
Gary, this is really an important concept, because the chordal resolutions, as you called, it's a way of creating motion when there isn't any within chords, and it's a bit technical, but it shows that you have a reason for everything that you've done, which is really quite special, and I go ahead and go on. There's a question for a little bit later, but you should continue with what you're doing.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is that, remember for all of us that the technical side is nice when you can't think of anything else, because as we know as writers, we can't just turn on the faucet and all of a sudden ideas come out. Sometimes that happens, but probably not often enough. So what often happens is that if you don't have an idea in your head exactly how you want something to work, these kinds of concepts that I'm throwing at you, yes, they're a little technical, but at least they're ways to get you started. I often think about the idea that if you're a player and you're going to go out and do a concert, probably before the concert starts, you're going to be warming up a little bit. Get your fingers warmed up, get your head warmed up, get everything just kind of flowing. But as composers, we tend to just sit down and hope for the best, and I'm here to tell you that these kinds of techniques that I've been talking about today are things that we can use to kind of get our brain warmed up and to working as a writer, which is a different thing than playing. So you can use them just strictly in those terms if you want. And it works, really great. And I often do. I'm going to show you a real example here in a minute of some work I did. And I'm going to show you how I employed all this stuff. And it really does work. After a while, it gets to be more subconscious, where you're just kind of doing things because it works a certain way. But I also know that when I get stuck, I start thinking about, well, let's try this note going to this note because I know that it's going to have a certain result. Let's see if I can live with that idea, so that's that. So this then, so this is going to sound like this then, although, here we go. One more time. Whoop. Right, so we went from this concept, let's see where, I think it's this one right here. We went from this, which was right? So we went from that to this. But keep in mind too, that when we're just looking at this, this is, 4 layers, if you will. And we started with just 4 whole notes, one on each measure. And notice that nobody's doing too much. Everybody's doing a little something, and nobody's working very hard. None of these voices are working very hard, but they're all contributing to getting some forward motion going. And also from a technique kind of a side, I even created some things that, are kind of thematic, if you will, like this quarter rest, quarter note, half note, quarter rest, quarter note, half note, quarter note, half note. So there are things that are, staying consistent, and they're just little examples of craft, but that's what you're always trying to do is, even in this lousy 4 measures, I did not come up with this in 5 minutes. It really took some time thinking about, okay, well, which, tension tone do I want to use where? And, so it happens, you're massaging it, that's the way I tend to think of it. You're massaging it. Or in the case of, I always go back to thinking like a potter as well, and not Harry, but, thinking of things like this, and thinking of a potter, and the potter wants to make a cup. So what's the potter starts with a big wad of clay, and through massaging, taking a little bit off here, adding a little bit there, you come up with a cup or a bowl in the end. It looks beautiful, So, but this is where you start. I've never been a believer in the idea that your first idea is the best idea. I've always gone at it as the idea that, okay, I need an idea first, and then I can start working with that and manipulating that and massaging that, if you will, to come up with something that's usable for whatever my purposes are. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, Jerry. This is kind of an extra credit question, but there was someone who asked you to expound upon the concept of harmonic ambiguity, and I'm not entirely sure whether you want to talk about that or not. But some ways, some formed by this process do present some harmonic ambiguity, as you pointed out already. And maybe you'd like to speak a little bit about that. I don't know.
Well, I guess it, how ambiguous you are, if you will, depends on what kind of style your music is, that you're working with. Sometimes, for example, when you're working with what we call fourth shapes, where you've got either stacked fourths on top of each other. I mean, there's a process that is called Ambi Chords, which is short, which is a shortened word of ambiguous chords. And so fourths, they'll fit in a lot of different chord shapes, and chord qualities, but by themselves, they don't necessarily say what the chord is, and it just depends. I mean, if you're trying to write something that's a little bit more traditional, then you're probably not trying to be ambiguous. But if you're working in jazz or some sort of 21st century composition, or even certainly parts of the 20th century, you can be, as ambiguous as you want. And I'm all for that. It just depends on the situation. I'm not sure that answers the question, but that's the way I kind of feel about it.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Now, what I want to do first here is I want to take a listen to this song. This is, as you can see, it's a piece called "Waiting for the Call," and it's written by a colleague by the name of Lech Violebe, and he's located in Switzerland and Germany. The way I came across Lech was that he contacted me to write some orchestra arrangements for him. His band, called Poetic Jazz, they play all over Europe, or they did before the virus anyway. And they had an opportunity to play with an orchestra, but they didn't have any orchestral arrangements of their music. So they've got 4 or 5 CDs at least of music, but they're just a jazz trio. and or I mean a jazz quartet, excuse me, flute, drums, acoustic bass. And by the way, the acoustic bass player, it's amazing. He's got a 5-string acoustic bass, and the 5th string is not on the bottom, it's on the top, so it's a C string. And he gets some amazing sounds out of that thing, not just in a melodic way, but in a real effect kind of a way. You know, things like taking the tip of the bow and doing like tremolos that are down near the bridge, you know, real mid-rangey kind of a sound, then mix that with, you know, chorusing or delays or whatever you want, you know, and you just come up with some really cool stuff. But anyway, so me and another composer, this composer's over in Poland, and he happened to be a conductor of an orchestra as well. So we had the opportunity to put together a whole program of orchestral arrangements of their music. And what started out to be a work for hire situation turned out to me being invited over there to actually conduct the music and then record it a few days later. Everything that we had done on the concert. So it was it started out as a small thing, like let's, you know, do an orchestral arrangement for these 4 tunes. And it turned into this big thing. And we ended up doing 4 different performances over 2 years in Poland. And then we did 2 performances actually here in Boston. And so it was, you know, you just never know how things are going to turn out, where they're going to go. You just never know. So if the gig sounds interesting, take it and see what happens. Anyway, so what I want to do here, though, is I want us to take a listen to this. And what I've done is I've just reduced down because it's a score. And by the way, the score and all the audio is in a folder that Milton can give you, can post the link for if he hasn't done that already. That's got all these examples and all the audio in there for you, so you can look at it again and analyze it a little bit more if you like. So what I've done, though, is I've employed these concepts of this resolutions. And so what you're going to see here is, again, just what I did with the strings and the flugelhorn and the piano. But along the way, you're going to see markings like right here. Here's a 2 going down to 1. Here's a 2 going down to 1, going down to 7 in the same chord. Here's a 5 going to flat 6, going to 7 up to 1. So these are those resolutions that I'm talking about. But I remember when I worked on this orchestration, some of it was by ear, and there were other spots where I just wasn't sure what to do. And I would just employ some of these resolutions. And, you know, it came out lovely, I think, you know. So you're going to see those things along the way. But let me play this first, and then we can talk about it. In the beginning here, there's a free area for the piano, and then the flugelhorn comes in, and then eventually the string. So take a listen to this, please. Yeah.
Hey, Jerry,
Yeah.
you're going to have to tell us who the players are. Is that piano or?
Yeah. The pianist's name is Enno Douglas, and he's a long time. He's lived in Hamburg most of his life, Hamburg, Germany. The trumpet player, flugelhorn player's name is Klaus Uberschauer. The bassist's name is Lech Violeba, and the drummer is his son, Pavel Violeba. And yeah.
The bassist? Yeah.
That's Lech Violeba, the one with the 5-string acoustic I was talking about.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Bass sound. That's just lovely. I mean, you know, what's great is all the movement in the string section that is not, playing against each other with chordal resolutions, and it's just really effective.
Yeah. Well, thanks. One thing I also learned, everybody, along the way is that strings can have a lot more motion than if I were to try and orchestrate the same kind of movement for brass, for example. It would have a totally different effect, and it would probably get in the way of the melody. But strings have what I call a transparent kind of a sound, where they can really mix and kind of glue a lot of stuff together, more so than other combinations of instruments. Woodwinds are like that, although not to the same degree, I don't think. But I think of, when I think of strings, I don't want to think about, even though I come from a rock and roll background to begin with, I'm not going to just think of strings as a left hand, here's my comping part, and when I'm putting strings together in sequencing, I'm definitely thinking 4 and 5 parts. I'm not going to just have one voicing or just one kind of movement. There's always going to be somebody moving along within the voicing. I think it's just important to be able to do that,
What about Lech? Did you discuss composition with Lech? I mean, do you think he is wise to the tone thing? I mean, this is a different subject, isn't it, than what we were on before?
It is. Well, it is in the sense that we're not talking about a tone row here, but we are talking about the resolutions, So, how Lech originally came up with the melody, I don't know. But when I went into this project, I wanted the arrangements to be such that the quartet wouldn't have to do a lot in terms of learning brand new parts or anything like that. I wanted like that piano version, like the piano intro and the first verse with the trumpet or flugelhorn, that was exactly the same way as it was on their quartet recording. And so it was really adding the strings to everything else and finding some spots where I could use them in an interesting way,
One more little thing. Tell me a little bit about the string section and how big it was.
Yeah, there's for this, there was it was all people from Poland. In the area that these people are all from is called Pomerania, which is right along the Baltic Sea. And it's a beautiful area, actually. And they're all from that area. This is what they call the Philharmonie Baltica. So like the Baltic Philharmonic or something like that. And so as far as the strings go, it was, let's see, 2 basses, 4 celli, 4 violas, 5 first violins, 5 second violins. Yeah.
Substantial size string section.
Well, it's not 16, 14, 10, and it's not, what we would want in the, LA Phil or the Boston Symphony or something like that, but it's certainly enough to get a good sound. It doesn't sound like a small group.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was fun. Let's see. So, I have to see that there was a question by Martin. He was wondering how many tone rows. Yeah, there wasn't any tone rows used in this, but I definitely did or was thinking about the resolutions. And, you know, the other thing to think about too with the resolutions, now that I think about it, is that if there's one thing that we could say about this piece, this arrangement, okay, it's a ballad, of course, but it's really smooth. You know, there's not much about it that really is angular or in any way, you know, not, you know, any way chromatic really or anything like that. There's no big leaps in the melody or anything like that. And that was on purpose. The idea is that it's a really laid back kind of piece. And so that's the way I treated the strings. So when you see a lot of half step, whole step, common tone motion, that's what's lending itself to this whole concept of chill. You know, let's just lay back and enjoy the piece, you know? And so when you start.
Right, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, it's just it's a important point. You didn't cloud the original composition with too much unnecessary around. You didn't add the wrong thing, which added to the calmness and yet still vastly interesting, you know, so.
Yeah. I noticed that Jacob had a question there too about the rhythms, about the flugelhorn in the solo section. Yeah, you know, the player, you know, when it comes to playing a melody and improvisation both, I mean, if I don't give the player the chord symbols, then they're not going to know, you know, what harmony to work with. But even when they're playing melody, just like it's stated on here, I give them the chord symbols as well, only because when I give the player a melody, if they're playing it by themselves, I don't expect them to play it back exactly like I wrote it. Like a vocalist, I expect them to interpret that and, you know, give it their own 2 cents, if you will. So yeah, I would give them chord symbols in this case as well. And, you know, in this case, the player actually knows the tune and probably didn't even need the written music anyway, other than to follow the arrangement. But yeah, I would definitely, you know, I would still definitely give them chord symbols on their part if they're improvising or even if they're just playing the melody. Any other questions? So, but one other thing while you're looking to see if there's any other questions is this goes into another topic that we really don't have time for now, but one that I'd like to explore further, you know, like at another session, perhaps, if I'm, you know, lucky enough to come back, is the idea of melodic shape. And what I mean by melodic shape is that you can, and this is something I got from Jack directly, actually, is the concept of that there's 3 basic shapes. There's what's called a line shape, which is a static idea. So like a held long tone or an ostinato that repeats over and over again. And that has a certain effect. There's also what's called the circle shape, which is more half step, whole step, common tones, really smooth, right? And then there's also a third shape called the square shape, which is a lot of leaps. And so, you know, to make a long story short, if you want to create a melody that's got a lot of dramatic sound to it, adventurous, you know, you don't have to look any further than John Williams. If you look at every single main title he's ever written, there was always going to be some leaps in the melody, and very often at the very beginning of the melody, the very beginning of the phrase, I mean, because that's, you know, draws in the listener's attention, and automatically there's some drama going on because you've got this big leap. And it's almost like the bigger the leap, the more drama there is. You know, you can think of things as simple also as like Star Trek, you know, the first interval's a 7. So ba da 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 octave, ba, ba, da, you know, and that show was all about drama and adventure all over the galaxy, right? So, but that's just one stupid example. I mean, you can look at, you know, the theme for Superman, Star Wars. I mean, all these things, and not just John Williams. I mean, but composers know this. They don't call it line, circle, square like Jack did and his students, but they know it intuitively that, okay, if I want just a really laid back kind of an idea, then the melodic phrase has got to be either static or something really smooth, so it's not distracting. But if you want,
well, these are all
no,
tools that the composer needs. All these tools, you know, conceptual tools, if nothing else, you know.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I mean, and it really helps as the composer if you know that, okay, I've got to create this little phrase here that needs to be dramatic. Okay, what goes into a dramatic phrase? Well, right away, you know, leaps. Okay, bingo, there you go. And I don't care if you put the leaps in the key of G flat or if you put it in the key of C. Those leaps are still going to be there, and it's still going to be dramatic. You know, I agree that there's, you know, a difference in sound between the key of G and between the key of C and the key of G flat. But beyond that, you know, those leaps are still those leaps. So you're still going to get the effect no matter what key you're in.
Right. Good point.
Yeah. Are there any other questions anybody's got? I mean, I'm kind of at the end of, you know, what I wanted to present for today, but I mean, certainly if anybody's got any question, please throw them my way. I'll be,
well, we've got an eye on the questions, and it's just been so rewarding with you today, Jerry. And you're welcome back anytime, as far as I'm concerned, and anybody else. I think I find these really fun with you because we really dig in. It's you know, it's very nuts and boltsy, and I love that.
Great. Well, thank you. It's always been great to be around.
Yeah. We need these tools, you know, and we love to talk about them. I do.
Yeah.
And explore them. So much material here that we can all go back to our drawing boards, you know, with.
Well, and that's, you know, that's an important thing too. You know, we're all looking for, you know, we all get into ruts with our writing, you know, I mean, or playing for that matter. You know, when you're practicing, we're often practicing the same things over and over again that we've been doing for years. But, you know, there's ways to get around that and kind of step outside that a little bit. And, you know, that's one thing I have to tell everybody that, you know, through all this craziness that's been going on for the last, oh God, going on a year now, not to mention the political stuff going on, not just today either, but for the last 4 years. I mean, all of that stuff, music has been one thing that's been really helpful to me in terms of just getting away from, you know, what's going on. I mean, you know, even this, you know, 2 or 3 hours that we've been here today, it's been, you know, just really, it takes my brain away for a little while, and that's great, you know.
Truly.
It works beautiful. Charles has got a question about, he's asking about with a full orchestra, how do I decide which notes to double and which instruments, you know, to double? Yeah, Charles, I don't, and for everybody really, I tend, you know, when you're learning about classical harmony and classical orchestration, you know, you're kind of taught about, you know, what notes to double, what notes not to double, kind of that stuff. I tend to totally just don't even pay attention to that. I tend to look for sound, and, you know, what's the color that I want, and that's usually my guiding light. Is you know, what's the sound? And then the other thing I'm always trying to do too is not get some intervals too low. You know, like if you put a major third interval, you know, like on a B flat chord, the B flat to D, that major third. If you put it too low, then you're going to get a lot of rumbling and a lot of, you know, low end. There's no a word that we call it, but I'm trying to think of it now. But it's just not usually pleasant. And so I'm watching out for those things usually too as well. But as far as what instruments are playing the notes, it's usually got to do with the sound, the color.
That's kind of a balance thing. If you put a major third down that low, you're getting a huge amount of power down in that, you know, that range. There's another question also about how do you, when you're writing for strings, do you start at the top, do you start at the bottom, or the middle of the section? You know, how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, being originally a bass player, I tend to start with the melody and the bass first. You know, the inside voices seemingly aren't so important, but one thing I learned years ago is, and Dick and Jack and Ellen always talked about this, is that the ear, you know, the listener, the brain, hears the tops of voicings and the bottoms of voicings really well. It's the inside stuff that can't be heard as well. So if you've ever done transcriptions, you know that, oh, I can hear the melody, I can hear that really well, and I can hear the bass really well. Now let's figure out what the inside is. And so I tend to work on the melody or the top voice. It might not be the melody, but at least the top voice, because the listener's definitely going to hear that. And even in the recording you just played, or that I just played, you could always hear that top voice against the melody always going on. But the bass line, so the melody or the top voice and the bass line are like two really, really important things. Beyond that, you know, the middle voices are more secondary, you know. And
it reminds me of something that I don't know if it was Roger Steinman or David Angel said, the more you repeat an idea, the more it recedes in the listener's perception. You know, so a prominent idea repeated ad infinitum will recede, you know, and you want to focus on something else.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Ostinatos are like that. So if you repeat, and a great example of an ostinato doing that would be the composer David Shire did a movie in 1970, I think it was 1974 or so, called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. And in it has a 2-note ostinato, B flat to D flat. And it happens just over and over, bum, 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 for like 2.5 minutes. That's the whole main title. But on top of the main title, he's put real 12-tone on the top of that, because The Taking of Pelham had to do with terrorists. Now, this is the 1974 version of terrorists taking over a subway train, going from wherever it was starting, but going to Pelham, New York. And so, you know, that was a way to get some sort of tension going in the main title. And that's, you know, the
that was the number of the train line. Yeah. Pelham.
Yeah. And the ostinato was the stability, which is fantastic. And just a 2-note ostinato. And then the 12-tone over the top was just beautiful. I mean, the ostinato gave it the stability, while the 12-tone gave it the tension, for sure. You know,
incredibly effective score, and no doubt, you know, gained him quite a bit of notoriety.
Yeah. Perry's got it. He's saying nothing like terrorism in 12-tone. He's absolutely right. And actually, you know, it's funny if you go back and look at 1950s movies, the Twilight Zone, you know, which they just had their marathon over the, you know, New Year's and stuff. And, you know, you can hear so much 12-tone in all of those. I mean, it was a style at the time, but that sounds like 12-tone, and it like we're used to, and it sounds very, you know, tension filled, which it's supposed to. Of course it's going to. But my idea is to, okay, well, let's use 12-tone for a different way. We know how to do it to get terror. Now, how can we use it in other ways that are just used for generating source material? You know, that's my thinking, you know. So anyway, cool.
Well,
nice.
I think it's probably about time to wrap it up, but you know,
okay.
I could hang out with you all afternoon.
Thank you. I'm just looking to see if there was any time or anything else. Tony had a question about chord symbols. For the player, they always need to be transposed. If I was giving it to a piano or guitar, you know, a non-transposing instrument, then of course they would be concert pitch. But as far
guitar
as
is a transposing instrument. Guitar is a transposing instrument. Yeah.
Technically it is, but you can't transpose an octave. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, and then Eric was just correcting me on the Star Trek thing. Yeah, no, I didn't mean to put that together like that. I was in my head just thinking about melodies, main titles that have all those leaps in them, and you know, John Williams, like I said, probably every movie he's ever done, the main title's got leaps in it because he, you know, everything he writes for film is, you know, usually very dramatic stuff. You know. And then Ryan's got a good point too. All of your rules and guidelines can be broken if something else sounds better. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely subjective. You know, you take a listen to it in the end, and you know, make choices. You know, same thing with what I've been doing in my own writing is that, I might use 12 tone as a resource to kind of get me started. But then as I get going, I'll hear, either additional things or things instead of or whatever. And in that case, the 12 tones have been a way to just get my brain moving. And that works great too here.
Yeah, I think you demonstrated that quite well. And, that's important to keep moving, to keep having ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. And Martin just had a question about the circle and line thing. Yeah. Just the idea simply that a line shape, just think of the shape. So the shape of a line is a line. It's just flat and static, right? So things like high pedal points, what we call wires, those we hear them in film all the time. Or you might have like a low pedal point, think Jaws or something like that. Those are ways to maintain some stability, just kind of sit there. But a line shape doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of sits there and kind of sets up the action to come. Now, a circle, on the other hand, is very smooth. Think of the shape. Because your melody goes up, it doesn't have to come down necessarily, but it often does. But it's smooth, half steps, whole steps, common tones, things like that. Whereas a square shape, again, think about the shape. It's got edges, it's got points. And so it's what we call very angular, and so the melody's got lots of leaps in it. And so, in a nutshell, that's what that is. But, if I come back again, I'll definitely talk about that with lots of examples. I mean, there's lots of examples of how composers use that kind of information, but yeah.
Is your mic not working?
My mic? Should be on.
There you are. No, Milton.
Oh,
I think Milton said he was having a technical problem. So
no, I'm sorry. That was actually somebody private messaged me, and you answered the question, so my mic's fine. But yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, well, this has been great, Jerry. We'll definitely schedule something soon.
Great.
Any time to pass on Jack's legacy as well. That's great.
No kidding. So before leaving, I would just like to say thank you for having me. But there's always it's so great to see so many people involved, not only with this session, but all the other sessions that ASMAC's been doing. It's really a great organization, and Milton, you're doing amazing things there. So keep it up. It's a pleasure being a part of it and helping to give back, some of the things that I've gotten over the years as well. But thank you for having me, and Gail, thank you as well. And Charles, nice meeting you today. And it's just great being here. Look forward to coming back.
That's great. That's wonderful. Milton, do you want me to say a few words?
Go ahead.
Okay, then I'm going to say a few words. Okay, so for those of you who are still with us, I thank you for being here today. And I know we still have quite a few, I haven't looked at the count, and I think we still have quite a few people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jerry, a huge thank you from all of us for being with us today and sharing your incredible knowledge. Once again, it's amazing. Your thought process is fantastic, and we need to do a part 3. So I would love everybody to turn on their cameras and give Jerry a huge round of applause. Yes, come on, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We got 105 applause people.
Wow.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, we love it. So wait, let me get back to my thoughts that I have to continue to share. Okay, so Jerry, thank you. And we will see you.
Thank you very much.
It will just be a continuation. Part 3 will be the next one. I think you've done 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Thank you.
Part 3 is coming, everybody. So, all right, we've done that. Now, a few thank yous. Working behind the scene for our Zoom, Greg Sims, Milton Nelson. Thank you guys for being there and watching over all of us, and to obviously Chuck Fernandez, who welcomed all of you first. And he's just amazing. But of course, a huge thank you to Dan Ferguson for being such a wonderful host for Jerry. Dan, you did a great, great job. It's wonderful. Yes, and you look great too. Everybody looks great. So needless to say, this coming Saturday is going to be a very, very different event, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Fantastic. We're going to have a conversation with Mark Shaman. For those of you who don't know him personally, you are going to be amazed at this human being. I just am so excited for you to experience him. And we're going to have with Mark, we're going to be having Jeff Atmagian, Doug Besterman, Richard Kraft, and Nate Patton. They all will bring something different to this event to add to what Mark is going to be saying and talking about. And I know you'll really, really enjoy it. So please, when you get a chance, sign up for the event mails at www.asmac.org. Check out our website. And if you feel so inclined, join us, become part of our family. We've grown enormously in 2020, and maybe we can double it, because we are now more than just a village. We're huge, and we're getting bigger and bigger, and I just would love you to all be part of our family. Anyway, but we thank you for being with us. Please like us on Facebook, sign up for our Twitter and Instagram feeds, and the icons are in the upper right top of the website next to the donation button. Please do check our website calendar, and because January is going to be very, very, very busy, and we're really excited about all of it. And I just, I always say to at the end of all of our webinars, and for those who are joining us for the first time today, it's so important to be cognizant of what's going on around us now. Please be smart, stay safe, stay well, and keep that smile in your heart, because that is a great healer. And, there are better days coming, and we started with today. With all the stuff that's going on in the world, look what we just had today. And there'll be another one on Saturday. So I thank you all so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. And tell your friends. Wilton, do you want to say something? Jerry, you're amazing.
Oh, just thank you to Jerry again. Sure, we can keep going.
Just how do you, well, yes.
We're so great to see everybody here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks to everybody for joining us.
Did you post those files, Milton? I just meant to ask you.
Yes, I'll do it again several times, but yeah, we'll keep doing it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And everybody should be aware that is still with us, down at the bottom of the chat in the right-hand corner, click on those three little dots and you can save the whole chat if there's questions that were answered and stuff that you want to refer to, or you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so there you go. But just please, please, please stay well. Stay safe.
All right. Thank you very much.
Right.
Take care, Gal.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dan.
And in case if you missed it, it's Toasted Hop. Do you want to tell us about Toasted Hop real quick, Jerry?
The idea with Toasted Hop actually was that I wanted to write something with a swing 16th groove, so like a hip hoppy kind of groove, but I wanted the melody to be a little toasted. So that's where the toasted meaning chromaticism. So, and I was lucky enough to have, I think we had about 7 or 8 horns for that, plus a double rhythm section. So had plenty of people to make some noise. But the thing, that I can talk about at another time too, is the melody for that is, I wrote the melody, but then wrote chromatic approaches to the melody notes. And that, created some really interesting stuff too. So we could talk more about that again. All right. Take care now. We'll talk to you soon.
Here's Toasted Hop.
Here's to the next time.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Well, fantastic, Jerry. That was great. So thanks,
Okay.
Oliver. It's been great seeing you. Yes, Gail?
I was going to say, we always have traditionally at the end where Evita says goodnight, Evita, but I think Greg has to say goodnight, Greg.
Oh, where's Greg? Well, how about Jonathan?
Okay.
Yeah, because it's always. Well, let me stop sharing too, so we get a full screen.
Okay. Yay, Jonathan. There you are.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody.
So you get to say goodnight, Jonathan.
Good night.
How are you doing, Jonathan?
Oh, very well, thanks, Milton.
Well, Happy New Year.
Beautiful program. Happy New Year to you too, and bravo, Jerry. Beautiful, beautiful program.
Well, great to see you, Jeff. Great to see you, Bonnie, Jacob, and all others who had their cameras off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, say goodnight, Jonathan.
Good night, Jonathan.
There you go.
Good night, all.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you all hopefully Saturday.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.